Hello and welcome to Deep Thoughts, Shallow Plots. My name's Erika, and I really like watching horror movies.
My name's Katy, and I really like overanalyzing things. What are we overanalyzing today, Erika?
Well, Katy, today we are overanalyzing Cabin Fever, the Eli Roth film from 2002.
This is our first film we're watching that I had not previously seen.
I also think that this is the first movie we've covered on this podcast of is this our fourth film?
Yeah.
Out of the four films we watched, I definitely think this is the one I've liked the least.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to talk about this film knowing the underlining message of not actually really liking this movie very much.
But we are going to be real serious about it anyway.
Oh, yeah.
We are going to overanalyze everything.
I still have a lot to say.
I have so much to say.
Can I actually start with talking a little bit about Eli Roth?
Yes, actually. I know that you are a fan of his, in a way.
I am. I really like Eli Roth.
My only thing that I'm really familiar with him is in Inglourious Bastards, where he's an actor, not a director-writer. So
Right, yes. So that was my first introduction to Eli Roth, was in Inglourious Bastards, which I maintain as my favorite film.
It's a good one. And Eli Roth is like kind of hot in it.
Oh, yes.
Hey, remember for Halloween when we dressed up as the Glorious Bastard characters?
Yes.
You were him.
Our senior year of college, we were femme versions of the Bear Jew and Aldo Rain.
Yeah.
We've got some pictures somewhere.
Yeah, we looked good.
We looked great.
We looked so good. Nobody knew who we were.
But yeah, Inglourious Bastards is one of my favorite films. And I think what makes it it's a great film for so many reasons. And one of those reasons is Eli Roth's character, Donnie Donowitz, a.k.a. the Bear Jew, right? That was my first introduction to him, and as a 17-year-old, when I saw that film, I found him incredibly attractive. And to this day, I still find Eli Roth incredibly attractive. I'm probably going to take some stances. I think I might be a bit of an Eli Roth apologist.
Okay.
I still like him.
I support you in all that you do. I can't say I support Eli Roth in all that he does, but I support you.
That's all I need. Yeah. So, and then that's kind of when I started to get into Eli Roth's body of work as a director, as a writer, as a producer, because while he does great in Inglourious Bastards, if you see any of his acting in anything else, it's not good. He's not a good actor.
I will say his role in Cabin Fever is my favorite.
Really?
Absolutely.
Oh, Grimm?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he's
brilliant in this. I wouldn't say his acting is good, but it is brilliant.
Yes. Well, he's got a fully developed character.
Yeah,
like, I know who Grimm is. I know that guy. Yeah.
We'll talk more about Grimm.
Yeah.
And especially Dr. Mambo.
And then it was about that time that I started getting more into Eli Roth. That's when I saw Hostel for the first time, which I still maintain is a fantastic film. I like Hostel. And
I know a lot of people like it. It's one I haven't seen. We'll do an episode, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. Hostel 2 as well. He's got some producer credits on movies that I really, really enjoy. Clown is...
Not familiar.
Yeah, it's, I think, like 2016-ish.
Oh, okay.
Give or take a year. He's just got a couple producer credits on films I do really enjoy. Mm-hmm. And, I think he's a good producer. I think he's a good writer. I think he's an interesting director. And his acting leaves a bit to be desired.
Yeah.
But I don't really care. And really, all of this is informed by the fact I find him incredibly attractive.
Right. Yeah. No, that's always important.
That's
always important.
And I can admit that.
The fact that I find Ryder Strong rather attractive does not save him in this movie.
Right. So how do we deal with these feelings, right? I feel like what came up a lot for me watching this film and all the things I didn't like about it was the tale as old as time. How do you separate an artist from their art?
As somebody who really likes Eli Roth and did not like this movie much.
And I've seen this movie before, and I actually, when I watched it for the first time, probably towards the end of high school, senior year of high school, I really liked it. And so I was like, oh, I can't wait to watch it again. And as I hadn't seen it in forever, and I was like, I can't wait to watch it again. And as I'm watching it and the things that we'll discuss come up, I'm like, this movie might not be good.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
It has parts, I would say, that are good.
But I just want to, again, Eli Roth apologist.
Yes.
This is one of his first films.
Mm-hmm.
I think it might be considered his first film. He co-wrote it with
roommate from
college, yeah.
Randy Pearlstein.
Yes. Yeah, good job. Yeah.
Yes.
And so it's one of his earlier works, and it was written a long time ago. It was actually written in the 90s, and he was trying to get it produced and, and made, but at the time, the studios were not interested in producing horror movies. They thought horror movies could make money, right? And then Scream comes out, and they're like, oh, horror movies can make money.
Cabin Fever, here we go.
Yeah, and then, so they do finally pick up Cabin Fever.
And they even let him keep the N-word.
I also, just the one, though, just the one.
Well, two, I think.
Oh, that's true.
They say it at the end, too.
Yes, but
it's okay, because I think
a black person says it the second time.
Yeah, does he say it back, though? I can't remember.
I can't remember. Yeah,
Whatever.
There
may be three.
I appreciate you so greatly for watching this film a second time. So
I found it actually less uncomfortable the second time.
Oh, good. Okay, I want to hear about that.
Yeah.
So can I just give a rundown of what this film's about, right? So it's a pretty straightforward cabin in the woods narrative, right? 5 recent college graduates rent a cabin in the woods. They think they're just gonna have a fun
sexy time.
A sexy weekend
for everybody but Bert, I guess.
For drinking nothing but beer, no water allowed, right?
Yeah.
But then they begin to fall victim to a mysterious and incredibly fast-acting flesh-eating virus.
Yes.
Which attracts some unwanted attention from
the locals.
The locals, right? So, I've got the characters right in front of me. Why don't I establish our characters and then we'll start talking shit about them? How's that sound?
Okay. God, these motherfuckers.
Oh my gosh. So we've got Jordan Ladd. That's the actress who plays Karen. Right?
Okay. Our blondie.
Our blonde, yes. We've got Ryder Strong, who plays Paul, which everyone knows from Boy Meets World. Everyone who's anyone knows that Ryder Strong was Sean from Boy Meets World. We've got James DeBello, who plays Bert, who's probably the character I have the most to say about. We've got Serena Vincent, who plays Marcy, and we've got Joey Kern, who plays Jeff. Those are our 5, right?
Yeah.
And so any of you following along at home might already be a little bit ahead of us, that when we've got 5 main characters, we've got ourselves some archetypes.
Yeah.
Right.
And just hold on for that.
Yeah, just wait a little bit. So where do we even begin? Who do you want to talk about first?
Well, I think I just kind of want to talk generally about how all 5 of our protagonists, when we first meet them, they are like so shocked by how the locals treat people, by like how the guy at the convenience store is like maybe going to beat up his kid Dennis, how they're using racial slurs.
Yes.
They also actually later, when they see the pig being butchered at the farm, they're like kind of freaked out and grossed out by it when it's like, they're at a farm. Of course a pig's being butchered.
Yeah, like, do they not eat pork? Like, do they not understand how
they're like,
they got pork? Yeah.
So offended and outraged by these locals and kind of think they're above them without having any self-awareness about how horrible they are themselves. Like, okay, just in like the beginning, the lack of care they have for the world around them. We've got like Jeff and Marcy kissing while they're driving. We have Jeff running a stop sign.
A stop sign.
He runs, I think he runs like 2 stop signs.
Wow.
Later, Bert just has this fire in the forest that he just leaves super unattended.
Yeah.
Like, he starts it around the fire pit. He doesn't even start it in the fire pit.
What an idiot.
And then he just walks away to then go shooting his gun at random things.
Which also makes me uncomfortable, because we are led to believe that all of these people are college graduates.
I think Jeff is even going to go to law school.
He's pre-law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, wow.
Which, I mean,
law students are probably full of idiots.
Well, but also someone, depending on your timeline, and someone can go to college whenever they damn well please, but like, or not, if that's whatever. But like, people who graduate from college, they're like 22 years old, and that's a pretty young person. But you would just think that like that young person would still have like an understanding of their impact.
Yeah.
In the space they're in.
Especially with Jeff, but probably to an extent with the other characters too.
Yeah.
I just get really like rich bitch vibes. These all seem like rich kids.
Definitely.
They seem like Nepo kids.
Especially Jeff.
Yeah. But like, so I just I'm not so surprised that they feel so above these locals and then also have no self-awareness. Like, that seems very true for who these kids are.
Right.
And yeah, this whole movie is just sort of them like kind of facing very immediate karma.
Yeah.
Because, like, the way that they treat the hermit is, like, we see them later when they're sick get treated the same way when, like, Paul stumbles into that camp with those kids. Like, he's the hermit that time.
Right.
And Bert kind of does that, too, with the convenience store.
Yeah. Dennis's dad when Bert shows up to when he finally gets back into town, which was a whole ordeal, right? Dennis's dad, who I don't think gets a name.
Oh, yeah, I don't
he's
know.
Dennis's dad.
Yeah.
He says, you being sick, that's your problem.
Right,
Right.
yeah.
So very much like,
Yeah, the only thing he cares
you.
about is if then you'll get Dennis sick and then me sick, and then that's my problem, which is the same way that our main 5 people treated the hermit. They're like, at first they're like, okay, we'll help you, we'll get you blankets, we'll call somebody, but Bert is immediately like, nope, closing the door, not helping.
Yeah.
And it all gets shut down the moment they realize that this could be a problem for them. Their car's going to get stolen or whatever,
Right.
and they might get sick, and suddenly they don't want to help anybody.
Right.
And so nobody's going to help them later either. And then also, like, they not just don't help the hermit, they also really don't help Karen when she's the first one to get sick.
no.
And like, yeah. And then nobody else stops to help them when they need help.
Yeah.
It's like immediate karma.
What they decide to do to Karen is like set her up in the shed.
Yeah. Like you could have just left her quarantined in her room.
In
it
her
was
room?
fine.
Yeah. Well,
God.
and you know, this is a toughie because we will talk about, you know, the plague narrative of this film.
Oh, I got stuff.
Yeah, we got stuff. And it's a toughie because, you know, this was made in 2002, right? And we really the flesh-eating virus is quite mysterious. We don't really get a lot of answers to the flesh-eating virus questions. We're never explicitly told how it spreads. We're led to believe it's through water contamination, but like it's only waterborne. We're led to believe, right? And it's also hard because since this movie was created, we've had an actual plague.
You may have heard of it.
So
It gives us different perspective on.
Yes, it gives us a really interesting and unique perspective as people who have lived through
Yes.
coronavirus, right?
Yes.
It's just like, well, and also it's different because coronavirus is airborne, right?
Yeah.
It's spread through air and close contact, right? Whereas this one is really only seems to be contracted through drinking water.
Yeah.
So it's a little different, but in other ways, not.
And not. Yeah. We will talk all about that.
Man, I just have so many feelings.
Don't even know where to start.
I don't even know where to start.
Well, you have a lot of feelings about Bert.
I have a lot of feelings about Bert. I think he's gross.
He is icky.
But you know, really, if we are to compare him to the other characters, particularly Paul and Jeff, is he any grosser?
Yeah.
I maintain yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we were talking about this a little bit before. That I kind of have a harder time with Paul than I do with Bert.
And I completely understand that.
Yeah.
And I understand why. Let me just tell a couple reasons why I find Bert to be the grossest.
Yes.
So when we meet him, he's wearing a shirt, a very inconspicuous looking shirt with just a little print on the, you know, the left hand pocket area that says ripe on June 13th, 2004. And I was like, I don't know what that means. I had to look it up. And immediately I've realized that June 13th, 2004 was the day that Mary Kate and Ashley Olsen turned 18.
It's so bad.
It's so gross. The use of the term ripe.
It's so awful.
I hate it.
I hate everything about it. I hate that shirt exists.
And then later he takes off that shirt, thank God. But later then he wears a shirt with Ron Jeremy, who's, you know, a very famous porn actor.
Oh.
That one I'm just kind of, you know, whatever. Sex work is work. But and then also the other thing that just really hammers home that Bert is disgusting is that once he realizes that he's sick, right? He's like, uh-oh. He's like starting to cough up some stuff. The first thing he does is like check his penis. Yeah. Just like gotta make sure that's still there or like is unharmed right now.
God, what a fucking weirdo.
Yeah. And I just, Bert is so stupid.
No, I feel like he's the most outwardly obvious awful of them.
Yes.
The rest of them you could see and be like, what a nice young man.
Right.
You know, if you didn't know them.
Yeah.
But you do know them, you'd be like, oh, they're horrible people.
No. Yeah.
But Bert, there's no hiding it.
So I think one of the interesting and difficult things about this film is that when I watch a horror movie, I tend to subscribe to the auteur theory of film, right? Where like the director is the author and everything that's happening in the film, right? Down the dialogue down to like the positioning of the props in the set are significant and mean something.
Yeah.
However, there's a lot of parts of this plot that are confusing as to what function it serves.
Doing there?
I love that. I was like, what function does this serve? And you were just like, what the fuck are they doing?
You were trying to be all smart. And I'm like, this is bullshit.
Maybe I'm like in teacher mode.
Yeah. No, my note for the bowling story is just why with multiple Y's.
Why? Maybe I'm just like in teacher mode right now. Maybe I'm just like, what function does this serve? Right.
I had to sit with the bowling story for a while because I'm like, surely there is a reason for this. And it wasn't just that somebody had a really cool idea for a story that wasn't big enough for its own movie. So they were like, let's just throw it in here and it'll be great.
Right.
Surely.
So there's a couple things that happen that don't even necessarily advance the plot.
Yeah.
Right? They're not there to advance the plot. So why are they there?
Yeah.
Right?
Like, are they tying into the themes of the movie?
Yes.
Are they going to set up something that's going to happen later in some sort of way? Foreshadowing.
Right.
Like, what are they doing?
So for instance, let's talk about the bowling story, but I just want to set up the example of in the third act where Ryder Strong, Paul is driving and he hits a deer.
Okay, yeah.
And I was like, okay, that's like first act foreshadowing, right? Which in my opinion is very lazy foreshadowing, and I don't like it when horror movies kill an animal. Like
often with a car.
In an accident of that nature, right? I don't like that. I think it's cheap.
Yeah.
I think there's better ways to kind of make a sense of foreboding. But that's something that usually happens in the first act and not in the third when we're in the climax of the film.
Yeah.
So why, I don't have an answer as to why that deer scene is there, where he like crashes into the deer's face is right next to him, and then he busts out a shotgun and shoots the deer.
It. And then he's covered in more blood.
Yes.
I mean, part of it is to make him have a reason for him to look more like the hermit when he stumbles upon the group of underage partiers.
Oh my God.
He needs to have more blood on him to look like the hermit.
With Deputy Olson, who is also awful.
He's actually maybe the worst.
He might be. I feel like we've changed our blank. This character's the worst. No, this character's the worst. We'll definitely. I think we'll come to a conclusion.
Yeah, eventually.
Yeah, we'll
he
settle.
might be the worst.
Deputy Olson's up there. He's awful.
Yeah.
He's creepy. He's bad at his job.
He's specifically preying on underage girls.
Explicitly.
By getting them drunk.
Yeah. And he's obsessed with partying. And it's like...
And he's a cop, which as we all know I hate.
Yes, we know you're...
See our last episode.
Yes. We know Katie's a cab.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah.
So I don't even know what to say.
Yeah. No, but back to the deer.
Okay, let's talk about
this
the deer.
poor innocent deer. The other thing, I haven't actually thought about the deer before until you brought it up.
Okay.
But the other thing I kind of think of is that since one of the things that Eli Roth is doing in this film is actually... What's that word I can't pronounce?
Auteur?
No, homage.
Homage! Oh,
yeah. You pronounced it for me earlier, so I could remember it.
Yeah.
Homage.
Because you learn by reading.
I learned by reading, and it's not homage. Anyway, he pays homage to a bunch of horror films that he loves.
Very much, yes.
So part of me feels like it's sort of like, it's another way to sort of pay homage to the genre itself by throwing it in there somewhere.
Right.
And also specifically to throw it in there as a way to not, because that's the moment when Paul has almost escaped. He found another car. Right. He can maybe get out of here.
He could see a light at the end of the tunnel.
But like the genre itself won't let him. Is that too much?
No, I love it.
Is that
I love it. It's better. I mean, again, like I said, I didn't have an answer as to why this is happening. Yeah. So any insight I can have, I feel very comforted by. Hey, let's just do it. Tell me about the bowling story.
Okay. I had to really sit with this scene because it's my least favorite part of the movie. And when there's something that you really hate in a work of fiction, you gotta sit with it and figure out why. You gotta.
Yeah.
So my first problem with the bowling story actually is that we get it interspersed with them actually showing us it happening.
Right.
Like, what a missed acting opportunity. We could have just been on Ryder Strong's face and, like, the other kids' faces as the story is unfolding and letting them really act their hearts out. But, like, I don't think anybody had faith in these actors. Which is maybe unfair to them. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or maybe it isn't. We didn't get a C.
Or, again, you know, with Eli Roth directing this film and helping to write it, maybe he was just like, no, I want to see, like, some decapitated
It's just one of those parts where I feel like he is paying homage to all of these hallmarks of, like, horror movies.
Very
like,
much.
this movie is doing it much, but isn't actually thinking about, like, how it fits into this particular movie. So, like, there's the idea of, like, telling scary stories around a campfire.
Yeah.
But, like, what are the themes of this particular story, and how do they reflect in the rest of the movie?
Right.
Like, what does a disgruntled employee have to do with any, like, an infectious disease?
Right.
And, like, there was almost something with the victims having to sit around in that circle and watch each other die, which could have very easily been a thing that happened in this movie with these kids having to watch each other die.
Right.
But that actually doesn't happen.
Especially as while the story's being told, they're, again, around a campfire.
Yeah.
In a circle.
Yeah. It would have been a great setup for them to see each other die. But, like, at most, Paul kind of sees Bert die because he's there when it happens.
No one sees Jeff die.
Nobody sees Jeff die.
No one sees Marcy die.
He technically sees Karen die because he kills her.
Paul kills Karen. Yeah.
Yeah. But, like, that's not, like, nobody actually is there to watch them all die. So it's like, okay, well, that's not
it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's when I get left with that feeling of, like, somebody just thought this was a cool story and just really wanted to just stick it in there. I don't know. The other thing I thought of, which kind of goes back to how much these characters suck, and specifically why I don't like Paul, is, like, this is sort of a setup for just kind of how off Paul is. Like, how he keeps insisting that it's a true story.
Right. Because it's not.
It sounds like a typical urban legend.
Right, yeah.
And even after they sort of give it up and they start laughing, they're like, oh, this clearly isn't a true story. Paul keeps going on talking about how, like, no, I loved that bowling alley. These are all the things I did there. This is so great. And, like, if he actually does think it's a true story, to then go on to start, like, fondly remembering all the times he spent in this bowling alley where there were horrific murders is, like, such a weird character choice.
But there weren't horrific murders.
No.
It's
but
not true. He's making up a story.
Yeah, but the way he keeps insisting it, while at the same time talking about how he loves the bowling alley is the part I find weird.
Huh, yeah.
He's like, there was a horrible murder there and I loved that place. It's like, I don't know. I find that to be an early sort of, like, red flag for Paul.
Right.
Of, like, well, just telling the scary story and wanting to gross out Marcy and Karen, clearly.
Right.
But also just in general being like, wanting that to be in a place that he has fond childhood memories.
Right. Either despite the graphic, awful murders or in part because of the graphic murders. Well, and also the story is absolutely outrageous, right? Like, it's not...
Yeah.
Like,
no, I mean, at most, I would believe that maybe somebody got murdered at that bowling alley, maybe.
Yeah. I don't think that employees are being decapitated and their heads are being used as bowling balls.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. That is just such a hallmark urban legend.
To me, also, as someone who is much more familiar with Eli Roth's body of work, like, that is totally Eli Roth to me. Like, it's absolutely outrageous. It's totally unbelievable. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
Right? And, like, that's just that. Honestly, I'm starting to think that maybe that was just a story that Eli Roth came up with, and he was like, "What do I do with it?"
Right? That's what I kind of keep
Put
going
it in
back
my
to.
movie. Yeah.
My one little last thing that I have actually about it that I thought of is that there's early on in the story, Bert starts to laugh because, of course, Bert starts to laugh about it because it's funny that people are getting murdered.
And
with
also,
a ball peen.
I think that's how he deals with feeling uncomfortable.
Yeah. And Marcy is upset about that and says it's not funny. And Bert responds, "Yes, it is, you slut." And Marcy even looks to Jeff like, are you just going to let this guy call me
a slut?
And Jeff's like, what is fun? You know, like, he doesn't say anything. And, like, I don't know. That was just kind of how I felt watching the movie. Like, I felt like this, like, it's a horror movie, but it's also supposed to maybe have comedy elements to it.
Sure.
But whenever something funny was happening, I was just sort of sitting there like, that's not really funny. And then I just felt like the movie was being like, yes, it is, you slut.
Right. I think that, I think about this film is from 2002, right?
Yeah.
And yes, it's like, it was, written earlier than that, whatever. But, like, there is something about the era of the early 2000s. In 2002, we were in 5th grade. Okay?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So
that was the era of people saying gay when they meant bad.
Exactly. I think, I think about the language used in this film. I think about the N-word. I think about the R word. I think they use gay as a derogatory term to mean stupid 3 times.
Yeah.
Right. And I was like, this is just so early 2000s, you know? And it did kind of take me, it took me back to what was I doing in 2002? I was being in 5th grade, and I was surrounded by idiotic boys.
Yeah.
Who were calling things gay when they meant
Bad.
that they were stupid or bad. And people were calling each other the R word.
Yeah.
Or calling themselves the R word.
Yeah.
Right? So it's just like, that's kind of a pretty good little snapshot of the era we're living in.
Yeah.
It's not pleasant,
No.
but it's true.
No.
So
there was also that thing that you said
Uh-huh.
right after we finished watching it together, where you're like, I feel like this is a movie for boys.
Oh my gosh, it's such a movie for boys, right?
So I feel like that's part of what the bawling scene really set up for me.
Yeah.
Was the sense that, like, this is a movie for boys, and it's funny, you slut.
Yeah. So, hey, speaking of sluts, should we get into the sex scenes then?
Oh, yeah.
So
and what the fuck they're doing there?
There are 2 sex scenes, as I recall, right?
3 if you count the non-consensual fingering of Karen. But all I have to say about that is that if somebody is passed out, asleep, /feverish, they are not capable of consent.
So let's not include that sex scene. Let's talk about the 2 consensual sex scenes, which both involve Marcy, which might be a little bit of a hint as to where she falls in my archetypes.
Okay.
So first of all, we just established, we already know that her and Jeff are a couple, right? They're making out when Jeff's driving and is supposed to have his eyes on the road, which is one of my biggest movie pet peeves. It's just like eyes on the road, people.
Yeah. I think she's also like putting her hand on his thigh.
Oh,
and they're, teasing each other.
They're
not being safe.
But they're an incredibly sexual couple, right? And so they finally get to the cabin.
Yeah, the moment they get there, they make out.
Yeah, they finally get to the cabin, and everybody's like settled in a little bit, and Bert's like, I'm gonna go hunt, shoot squirrels or whatever.
The gay squirrels.
And Paul and Karen are gonna go hang out, take a dip at the lake on the dock, whatever. And then so Jeff and Marcy have sex, right?
Yeah.
It's a really interesting sex scene because it's prolonged. It goes on for quite a while.
You get the beginning of it with Paul interrupting.
Right, yes.
And then a little bit more of it with Bert getting caught sort of like pretending to peep on them for a second, and then he goes away to do his thing.
Yeah.
And then we don't see it for a while, and then we go back to it and catch back up on it.
And for like a while.
Yeah.
And
interspersed with Bert.
And it's interesting because they're like kind of, I don't remember who's on top. I assume Jeff.
I think it starts with Jeff, and then Marcy rolls him over.
Oh.
And then she's on top.
You go, Marcy. So, like, that's the thing, is that we're stuck looking at the sex scene for a while, and yet it's, the sex is not for display.
Yeah.
Like, everything's really close together, like, one of them's on top of the other. I think we do get to see some boob.
Yeah, we do see her boobs a little bit.
But we don't really get, like, full body shots. We just kind of get waist up.
I did see a thing about how the actress, I forgot her name already, Marcy's actress.
Serena Vincent.
Yeah. She had previously been in, like, Not Another Teen Movie or something like that, where she did, like, full nudity.
Yes.
And she was like, I don't want to get typecast as the fully nude person.
Yeah.
So she refused to show her butt.
Yes.
And then they had to, like, compromise with her, so you get just the tiniest upper portion of her butt in the second sex scene.
That's true in the second
But that's,
part,
like, all she wants to show. So, like, respect to her.
Yeah, whatever.
And I'm glad they, like, worked with her on that for the most part.
So, like, if Serena Vincent wasn't into that, like, again, why is this sex scene going on as long as it is, right?
Because the other behind-the-scene thing is that Eli Roth wanted to make something that sort of went back to the old 80s slasher stuff, right?
Right. Yeah, actually, I've got a little quote from him, right? So, this movie is inspired by a lot of his other favorite horror films, right? Evil Dead, notoriously taking place in a cabin in the woods, right? Texas Chainsaw Massacre also has, like, it's not really a cabin in the woods, but there's a rural element to it.
Yeah, and it's the locals being, you know.
There's, and The Last House on the Left, right? And so, Roth is quoted as saying that, like, what he saw the direction of horror movies going in the 90s and early 2000s is like a more watered down version, right? And he wanted to go back to the golden era, if you will, right? That the violence and the nudity are like essential parts of a horror film, right? And to go back to, you know, obviously the horror films from his childhood, you know, we all like the things from our childhood the most, right? Like, that's what we think was when things were done, you know, quote unquote correctly, right?
Yep.
So he wants to go back to that 80s horror film that has like a lot of nudity, a lot of sex, right?
And a lot of blood.
And a lot of blood, yeah.
But then it's like, okay, if the sex scenes are essential, what are these sex scenes doing that are essential to this movie?
Right.
And one thing I will say about them, actually, as those two sex scenes we're talking about, is that they do actually get this really nice kind of like mirroring to them. They're like connected to each other. Like they both start off with Paul saying something about condoms. In the first one, he accidentally walks in on them and is like,
use a condom.
Yeah, he says something like, practice safe sex.
Yeah.
Or whatever he says.
Yeah.
And then the later one, when they start to have sex, he's like, you don't use condoms?
Or like, should we use a condom? I don't remember what he says, but it's something about like inquiring about condom use, right?
Yeah.
And then, so that leads us to our second sex scene, which is between Paul and and Marcy. And this has, in my opinion, the most loaded line in the film. So, Paul is somehow inquiring about condom use, right? And Marcy's response is, don't worry, I'm healthy.
Of all the things to say.
A very interesting word choice.
Yes.
Especially since by the time Marcy and Paul are having sex, people are already starting to succumb to this mysterious and horrifying illness, right?
Yep. They have no reason to believe that they are healthy.
Exactly. So I wrote, my notes, I have healthy as in no STIs, right?
Right.
And it's like,
which seems to be what she means.
Which is what she means, right? But also, it's a two-way street. What about Paul, right? Like, I feel like Marcy is missing a critical element of like self-respect, and it's just like, I might not have any STIs, right? And sex ed teacher, so saying STIs. Like that Marcy might not have any STIs, but like, what about this person she's engaging in sex with, right? Like, she doesn't know.
Yeah.
She's probably making an assumption, right? Is she just not concerned about Paul? Like, maybe she's not, because he does come off as quite virginal.
Right, yeah. Though it's also, it's also her second partner of the movie.
Right.
She's also already previously had sex with somebody else who, again, like, what about Jeff? They maybe are in a monogamous relationship?
Yeah, I don't know, yeah.
I don't trust Jeff.
No, I definitely don't trust Jeff. So it's just...
That is an interesting point, how much she doesn't care about her own well-being. She only cares about whether or not she might be a vector for getting somebody else sick.
Right.
She's not thinking about whether she could contract something from them.
Exactly, right? And just the use of the word healthy, right?
Yeah.
Usually I feel like when someone's talking about, right, like STIs they may or may not have, I feel like the go-to word is clean. I'm clean.
But I wonder if that's just more for our era.
Maybe, yeah.
I don't know how people talked about it back then.
Yeah, I don't know.
Especially since they were closer to like the AIDS epidemic.
Truly, yeah.
So I don't know.
So, yeah, just
but that is interesting.
And it's
certainly interesting in a film where we're talking about a plague.
It's interesting because, like, what does it mean to be healthy, right? And it's like, actually, you are being faced with the risk of being incredibly unhealthy, right?
Yeah.
And then it's after this that we find out that Marcy has this mysterious flesh-eating disease, right?
Right, yeah. But don't worry, Paul pours Listerine over his dick, so he's safe.
It's fine.
He's totally fine.
I was looking at Reddit fan theories for this, and I like a lot of the comments were like, the only thing I remember that movie is Ryder Strong putting Listerine on his dick.
Of all the things.
Which is, again, like a very... he's a college graduate. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm holding him to a higher standard. Like, okay.
The other interesting thing about that scene, and specifically the I'm healthy thing,
yeah,
and not getting sick or whatever, is that while the first one was interspersed with these shots of Bert fucking around in the woods,
right,
about to cause problems for everybody,
right,
this one's interspersed with Karen dying.
Oh, yeah.
There's shots of Karen dying.
Except Karen, as she is getting sicker and sicker, right?
Yeah.
Because she doesn't technically die.
She does, yeah.
I mean,
technically, she doesn't die because of the disease.
This is true, yeah.
So I will give the sex scenes this, that they're mirrored really nicely and that they both sort of reinforce this idea of, like, infection.
Yeah.
Even and like this danger even when you think you're safe. And also just the general idea that we haven't actually stated out loud yet that sex equals death.
Right. I feel like, do we need to say it?
I mean, yeah.
Again, especially since like our last episode when we talked about Scream, I talked pretty extensively about slasher films.
Yeah.
And like and the idea within the slasher genre of sex equaling death, right?
Yeah.
And obviously this film being an homage.
Yes.
To the kinds of films that Eli Roth grew up with, which are those 80s slashers, right? So yes, absolutely, sex equals death.
Yeah, and just to touch on it, like specifically for this film, when both the girls' sickness is like revealed to the viewer, it's during sex acts. It's when Paul.
Yes.
It's when Paul starts touching her and then his hand comes up bloody.
It's all bloody and gross,
and shortly after that, Bert calls her a whore for no reason. Love that for you, Bert.
Bert, he's got a lot of things to say to women.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then we first realize that Marcy is sick during her sex scene when my least favorite shot, because it makes my skin crawl, is actually the one where he puts his hands on her back, and then when he moves his hand away, you can see the red marks where his hands were.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even become like open wounds or anything yet, but that scene is just my least favorite because I hate skin-on-skin contact.
Right. And then also later after they have sex when Marcy's in the tub shaving her legs, right? So there's a lot of like use of female bodies for sure.
Though even going back to Bert actually in Sex Equals Death, after he coughs up blood, the first thing he looks at is his dick, and that's where we see the first wounds are like right above.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's the first wounds of Bert we see. We see him cough up blood, but the actual skin disease that we see is right there, is that shot. So like, with the exception of Jeff and Paul, our other three characters, we first see their sickness.
Yeah.
Because of like sex-related things,
right?
Sort of.
Right.
Bert's a bit more of a stretch, but that is the first place he goes to check, and so it's the first thing we see.
Fucking Bert. So we're already on the topic of women. Should we
just talk about how Eli Roth has never met a human woman?
Yeah, and again, like he's my boy. Yeah. I really like Eli Roth, but you are correct. I don't think he's ever met a human woman.
I don't think he knows any
At
human
least
women.
when this movie came out in 2002.
Hopefully he's met some human women by now. But
so let's talk about how obvious it is that Eli Roth has never met a human woman.
But I do have one point that I felt was actually a little bit accurate to being a woman.
Okay.
Which was when Paul is like really slowly trying to like ask out Karen.
Yeah.
And sort of slowly walking up to it.
Uh-huh.
How quickly she's sort of like, we don't know that she realizes what he's doing, but she quickly tries to change the conversation twice.
Oh, yeah.
So that he doesn't even get to ask her out.
Uh-huh.
I've been there.
Doesn't she also, like, when they're on the dock, she's just like, oh, getting in the water now.
Yeah, right after they kiss.
These, those weird conversational escapes.
Yeah.
Like, don't want to talk about this. Yeah.
But
I can't tell you I don't want to talk about it.
It felt very, like, high school rather than college girl, but just that thing of, like, I like that this boy likes me.
Yes.
That doesn't mean I like him.
Yeah.
But it does mean that I'm going to keep making him like me.
Yeah.
That felt very like a high school girl.
Yeah.
Which means that, okay, maybe Eli Roth has met high school girls.
Right.
But no adult women.
What about adult women?
Yeah, what about adult women? That's the only thing I can give him.
Yeah. My big one is the leg shaving scene.
Who on earth is going on vacation for like what? A week maybe?
A weekend.
Like
a long
weekend, maybe a week. And brings a razor?
Right. No.
Also, we see her legs.
Yes.
There is no hair on those legs.
Yeah, she doesn't. They're already waxed or shaved or whatever. She doesn't need to shave her legs.
This is also technically her second bath of the trip. There's earlier when she says that she's going to take a bath. We don't see it, but she just says, I'm going to go take a bath. Because I guess that's what women do. They just go take a bath.
I'm actually very pro-bath. I'm pro-bath.
Yeah. No, especially since, like, I mean, I understand having that response when you just had an encounter with somebody who seemed like they were sick, wanting to just go take a bath.
Right, yeah.
Makes sense. But, like, why 2 baths in one little weekend, like, I don't know, and you're gonna shave your it's a lot.
Now, I have had conversations with women about how often they shave their legs, right? And I have met women who say, I shave my legs every day. And, okay, good for you.
Yeah.
But, like, who's got time for that?
I know.
I don't have time for that.
I don't have time
and
for
if
that.
I'm on vacation, I am not worried about the state of my body hair.
Yeah. And even if Marcy is, like, even if we think that Marcy is somebody who cares about that and shaves her leg every day.
Yeah.
We see her legs.
Yeah.
She's not somebody who needs to shave every day.
Right. And again, going back to like what function does this serve to the story?
Yeah.
Is like I think it's the body horror of the reveal of the shaving and like the open sores, right?
But then
we
like,
could see that another way.
And she does it for so long before she freaks out about it.
And she's like,
she does a few scrapes,
quietly sobbing about it.
Yeah, before suddenly she like realizes and gets up and starts screaming and crying about it.
Yeah, and then
runs
she like
outside.
It is in a tub and yet like comes out more bloody.
Yeah, it's
weird.
It's weird.
But yeah, definitely like it depends on the woman. But like if I'm traveling, I'm not bringing a razor.
No, it seems odd.
No.
And just based on like the quality of her hair's not that dark colored. It's not that thick. She probably doesn't get legs that are that hairy. Like, I just don't think so.
But then, also, not every chick can be as groovy as us, right?
Yeah.
Like, we get a lot of messages about the state our body hair should or should not be in, right? And so, she's a college graduate in the early 2000s. Maybe she's like, I need to make sure that my legs are shaved and my pits are shaved and whatever else,
I actually would almost believe her shaving her underarms.
There you go.
More than shaving her legs.
Yeah.
But I don't think that would look as sexy.
No, it's definitely not as sexy.
Even though you could get some boob shot, it still wouldn't be as sexy.
You could get boob shot. Well, we would already have seen her boobs by this point, so it's like
gotta
old
see
news.
her legs.
Yeah, it's old news.
No.
That's the big one that I was like, obviously this was written by a person who is not female.
I guess my other one is just Karen's character in general and her insistence on talking about like her past sexual experiences and sex and stuff. Like the conversations we have from her.
Yeah.
We get the story about how she went to Berkeley once and she loved it there because some guys would only let her drink beer and wouldn't let her go. We get that story from her. Ooh. She tells that to Dr. Mambo's owner.
And Grim. And she likes it.
Yeah. And then later we have her telling the story about how she was masturbating with her mom's like
shower head.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, what other things do we know about Karen's life? We know that some old family friend kissed her fully with tongue.
Okay.
So like every time Karen talks, she's just talking about like some past sexual experience. And it's like, does she have anything else?
Yeah.
Who the fuck is Karen?
I feel like the character of Karen left the least impression on me after this.
Because all she does is talk about sex.
Oh, and then she gets sick immediately.
Yeah.
So like she doesn't really do anything.
No.
Right? Yeah.
And I'm not even sure if Marcy talks about anything other than sex, really. Well, no, she does because she talks about Karen being sick.
Right.
But that's it. Because then her other big dialogue is the one where she talks about the plane going down.
Oh,
and when
yes.
How you want to just grab the person next to you and just have sex with them because you're all going to die anyway or whatever.
And then they have sex, yeah.
Yeah, that's like her big scene in terms of dialogue.
Yeah.
And it's like, women do talk about things other than sex.
Yeah.
I don't know, just by the way.
Yeah.
One other little thing.
Yeah.
I kind of like, but the implications are interesting, is that when Paul finds Karen.
Yes.
After Dr.
Mambo eats her face.
Yeah, after Dr. Mambo gets her, after he's killed Dr. Mambo.
Yeah.
She's kind of lying on her side.
Yeah.
And then he rolls her over and sees what the bloody mess she is.
Yeah, that she's missing half her face.
A pretty good mirror for how the hermit in the very first scene finds the dog lying on its side and then tries to roll it over and sees the bloody mess.
Yeah.
So like it's kind of an interesting, I'm always looking for mirrors,
Sure,
this.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting one, but it also kind of makes it feel like the dogs and the women are on like a similar level in this film.
Yeah.
As like the first to die and the vectors of disease.
Let's talk about dogs.
There's also like a little Red Riding Hood reference.
There is?
Yeah, when Dr. Mambo kills Marcy, when she steps outside randomly after a bath, for some reason she's in a red bathrobe.
Oh! And then she gets taken down by
a dog, and she's trying to get from her cabin to the other cabin.
Oh, yeah.
Which is very like trying to get to Grandma's
house.
From the wolf, which I'm like, that's cool.
Yeah.
What does it have to do with this movie?
Right. What's the point? Why is this happening?
Why is this happening? Do you have thoughts on dogs?
I do have thoughts on dogs.
That maybe could illuminate...
Oh, I don't know about that, but let's see. So there are, as I recall, 3 dogs in this film.
Okay.
There is what the dog we're calling Pancakes.
Right.
Who is the first dog we see who, when we see, is already dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's definitely named Pancakes in the really unnecessary 2016 remake. That's almost the same.
Yeah.
I don't think he's explicitly called Pancake in this movie, but we're just going to call him Pancakes.
Let's call him Pancake. And then we've got Dr. Mambo, who is Grimm's dog. Yeah. He's a doctor, like a professor or physician? Yeah, he's a professor of being a dog. That face. That's the best line in the film.
It is the only thing I will take away from this film.
He's a professor of being a dog.
There's honestly now a high probability that I will name my next dog Dr. Mambo. Is how much of an impression that left on me.
And then, okay, hold up. Now I feel like there's another dog.
Okay, no, there's actually, it's like 2 or 3 dogs when Paul first interacts with Dennis outside the convenience store at the beginning of the movie.
Yes.
And Dennis tries to bite him.
Yes.
I don't think he doesn't bite him as bad as he later bites Bert.
Yeah,
he gives him a little munch.
Yeah.
And Dennis's dad is like, there's a stream out back if you want to rinse it off.
That's right.
And he goes to rinse it off, and like 2 or 3 dogs actually come over.
Oh yeah, they're just hanging out.
And they just come over and they're like, hey, what's up?
They're just good doggos. Yeah.
Yeah, and Paul kind of lets them lick his hand. Yeah. And I'm like, you maybe have an open sore on that? Yeah. I don't know about letting random dogs lick, but I would too, because dogs, so whatever.
So there's dogs in this movie, right? Yeah. Like a lot of dogs. So obviously dogs are great, like, companions, right? Especially for the hermit, right? Yeah, it makes sense that you would have a dog, right? And
I feel for the hermit so bad when he finds his dog dead. It's the saddest part of the movie.
Except it does take him a while to realize his dog is dead, and I was like, it's pretty obvious that dog is dead.
But I think my reading of the hermit is that he is
maybe has a learning disability.
Neuroatypical in some way. Yeah, there's something.
Maybe has a learning disability.
Maybe something like that.
Yeah. So to me, dogs are usually like they're a symbol of loyalty and companionship.
That's a big one.
But they don't do that in this film.
No.
Right? Also, to me, dogs are like guardians and protectors, which again, not really doing in this movie. Yeah. So like, again, why is this happening? Why are the dogs here? Right. So I did a little digging and I found out that in several cultures all over the world, dogs are also used as a link to death and a transition from life to the living world to the underworld.
Oh.
So for instance, I am about to butcher some names. You ready?
I love it.
Katy?
Oh.
The Greek goddess of witchcraft?
Yeah,
Katy?
in Greek.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's great. Love her.
She's often accompanied by a pack of dogs, right?
Oh, yeah. And of course, Hades has Cerberus.
Yeah.
To go with more Greek stuff.
Hold on, man.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I'm excited.
Spoiler.
I love the chthonic Greek deities.
You do.
I'm here.
You do, yeah. So then maybe you should have told me this. No. She's accompanied by a pack of fighting dogs or hellhounds. And then I thought about, hellhounds are a thing. Yeah. Indeed, sometimes in depictions of Hecate, like Cerberus, she is depicted with 3 heads, one of which being a dog's head.
Oh.
The other 2, in case anyone's interested, is a snake and a horse.
Oh, just have that in your back pocket.
Yeah. And then, of course, we've got Cerberus, who guards the underworld for Hades, right?
He's a good doggo.
He's a good doggo. All 3 heads of him.
And if I remember correctly, Cerberus just means like Spot or Fluffy or something. It's like a really generic dog name that like the Lord of the Underworld just named his dog.
Rex, Fido.
It's something. Yeah. It's really cute.
In Norse and Germanic myths, dogs can also be a little bit more sinister. Here we go. Ready for me to mispronounce a Germanic name?
Oh, yeah.
Garmr.
There was like a lot of lead up to just...
I know. Garmr. Garmr.
Garmr.
G-A-R-M-R.
Garmr.
I'm really sorry, people who understand.
And I'm sorry we tried to say it like 80
Norse,
times and none of it was better.
And none of it was correct. Garmr is a hellhound, which is, the legend of Ragnarok or the last battle, is supposed to be responsible for the death of the god Tyr. Tyr.
Yep.
Well, they're responsible for killing each other in Norse mythology.
Yeah.
So dogs are vicious throughout mythology.
Is he one of the ones that's also like, you know how Loki has a bunch of random children? Is
no,
that dog
but
one of them? Oh, well.
Maybe.
Yeah, Loki has like a horse child. And like, I think he has a wolf child. He has like a wolf child.
And then my last example is is Anubis, right? An ancient Egyptian god, right? Is the head of a jackal, which is a kind of dog, right?
Yeah.
And do you remember what Anubis is the god of?
Like death and shit?
The dead. Yeah. Anubis is the god of the dead.
This is kind of an aside. If you're talking about jackals and other things that are sort of dog adjacent.
Right, yeah.
Hyenas.
Hyenas, yeah.
Not hyenas.
Hyenas.
Oh, God, now I can't say any word.
We can't say any word, yeah.
Hyenas. In some, like, African mythologies. Mm-hmm. I researched this for a random thing, and it was a while ago, so I don't know if I remember correctly. But they actually have a history with, like, werewolves, but hyenas. Mm-hmm. And the idea is that there are hyenas that can turn into people and use people voices to lure, like, children, humans, whatever, into the jungles so that they can then eat them.
Oh, yeah.
So just there's another sort of scary dog monster. Though also werewolves, if we consider wolves to be dog-like.
That's true, which I do, yeah.
And there are a lot of people who are just afraid of dogs and wolves. So, like, it's understandable that these beasts would have these more... I mean, I don't know if I want to say all of those gods and stuff that you mentioned have negative connotations, because death doesn't have to be negative.
Right.
But, you know...
So, yeah, so...
ties to death and ties to, like...
And a symbol symbolizing the journey from the land of the living to the land of the dead, right? Which is what Dr. Mambo does.
Yeah, and also if we consider pancakes to be maybe the first outbreak point, which it's unclear if he is or not.
Yes.
Then there you go again, that he's the one that sort of spreads it initially.
Yeah.
When he gets the hermit sick.
Yeah, Dr. Mambo is credited with killing 2 of our characters. And that does become a plot point when they're like Dr. Mambo's out running around rabid or sick or somewhere, and they like kind of have to like
work around him
or like stake themselves out to like try and, because like when they're trying to fix the car, but like the dog's out there too, so like someone's got to stand by with the gun in case the dog comes by while someone else fixes the car, right? Yeah.
So, dogs, man, what are they doing?
What are they doing there? Yeah, so I thought that was really interesting, and of course all the dogs are adorable, and
they're good boys. And I will take no Dr. Mambo slander.
Yeah.
One other thing,
Dr. Mambo apologist.
What?
Even though he kills 2 people.
Yeah. Why does Dr. Mambo act the way he does, like in the movie? Like, symbolism of dogs aside.
Yeah.
Is he sick?
Yeah, I think we're meant to believe he's rabid.
But that doesn't seem to be a thing that the current illness we're dealing with does.
Right. I wonder
They find Grimm, like, dead.
Yeah.
Paul finds Grimm dead, and it looks like he's been partially eaten. Which I kind of assumed he was partially eaten by Dr. Mambo.
Yeah, we're in the death list that I found online. It says that Grimm has been mauled to death by a dog, in parentheses, probably. And then they have listed Dr. Mambo as the killer, again, in parentheses, probably.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, I don't know if I believe that. I feel like I believe more that he died of the illness, and then Dr. Mambo did what dogs sometimes do.
Right.
Though he did it very quickly. Normally dogs take...
It's like a day. Yeah.
Yeah, no, dogs take way longer than that. If you're worried about your dogs eating you after you die, you won't for a long time.
Right.
He'll has to be really hungry before he decides that you're food.
I almost wonder if, like, because we don't really get to see any behavior of the hermit's dog because we see it's already dead. Mm-hmm. I wonder if there is, like, the way that, like, a sickness would hit everyone a little bit differently.
Yeah.
Right? That, like, maybe...
It hits animals differently?
It hits animals differently, and
it
hit
aggressive?
Dr. Mambo specifically, like, with a little bit of aggression that, like, maybe Pancakes was, too. We don't really get to see. We don't get to compare it to anything. And
we do get a brief mention from the hermit's cousin.
Oh, yeah.
The farmer chick.
Yes.
That pig is infecting all her other pigs.
That's right.
Possibly aggressively.
Right. Yes. And then we do get to see, because of the pig, we have another example of this being an interspecies issue.
Yeah. Which is weird and doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But, like, we even actually get brief when he's going to kill Marcy. We get, like, Dr. Mambo vision where it goes all red.
We do. Yes. Yeah. We do get to see from Dr.
So
Mambo's
he clearly has something going on with him, but, like, what?
Yeah.
What does it have to do with this illness?
It's unclear. And again, like, there's a lot that's unclear about this film. Like, we don't really get a clear sense of what is exactly happening.
Yeah.
Right? So just, another mystery for the ages, I guess. So speaking of, diseases and all that stuff, do you want to take us to Literary Corner?
Katie's
Is it time?
Literary Corner. Yeah, I do. And I do think it is interesting. If we just want to talk briefly before I get into the lit shit.
Yeah.
About how the disease works in this film.
Sure.
And how we've been saying it seems to be waterborne.
Right.
Because I feel like maybe some people would go against that because the first time we see it maybe infect somebody is the dead dog infecting the hermit.
Right. When he gets the blood on his hands.
So the reason why we're sticking with the water, though, is
right.
because all of our 5 main, co-eds, our 5 main protagonists,
yeah,
they don't show sign of illness until after they've engaged with water in some way.
Right.
Bert doesn't get sick until he drinks some water instead of beer and loses the beer bet.
Yes.
Karen gets sick after Paul offers her some water to calm down.
Right.
Marcy gets sick after we see a shot, zooms in on
her
having tea.
Yeah.
And after that is when she has sex with Paul and we find out she's sick.
Right.
Paul, despite coming into immediate contact with a lot of sick people,
right,
doesn't show any sign of sickness until after he falls into the water where the hermit is.
Right. With
dead.
the ground zero or whatever you want to call it.
And Jeff, noticeably, doesn't drink water.
Yeah.
Doesn't come into contact with any water. Doesn't wash his hands. I don't know.
Yeah.
We don't see it. And he doesn't get sick.
No, he doesn't. But also, technically, we are led to believe at the, by the end of the film that Dennis does get sick.
Yes.
With the virus after having bitten Bert.
Yeah, or at least everybody else believes that he has.
Right, yes.
So what we are led to believe is what spreads it through the rest of the town.
Is the water.
Is the 2 little kids who are going to make some lemonade.
Yeah.
And they get some water.
With the water, yeah.
And so then we see it and it's like, oh no.
And then we get 2 sequels.
Yeah. Oh God. I do also find it interesting how the locals actually take this infectious disease really serious and immediately take it as a serious thing. Just considering that we are now people who have lived through a pandemic.
Right.
And I just feel like a lot of people didn't take it very seriously. It's
no.
But
also, if you're right, but also I was thinking back to spring of 2020 and what utter chaos it was.
Yeah.
We did not know.
Right.
I was still walking around at work without a mask for a month before I was just oh, we're supposed to be wearing masks, right? So
because we didn't know, and also because people weren't higher up, people weren't taking it seriously.
Right. Yeah, and we had really in the state of Oregon, I think we had some pretty good leadership, but on the federal level, there was nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just very interesting that all these locals decide right away the moment they realize that there might be an illness.
Yeah.
They take extreme measures. But then I thought about the extreme measures that they choose to take are violence. And actually, even if we do think about our pandemic that we are currently actually still living through, we did have a rise in anti-Asian hate crimes.
Yeah.
Which is kind of similar.
Yep.
It's we
Outsiders.
only know how to fight disease when
Yeah.
we have some sort of sort of outsider, out-of-towners, or Asian people, as we did.
Yeah.
That we can project it onto. We don't know how to fight an illness any other way.
Right. Oh, yeah. And I think that goes with a general theme of this film that is toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
The men escalate a situation. The hermit doesn't even need to die. Or
No.
the hermit might succumb to his illness, but he is set on fire.
Supposedly by accident or whatever. They were freaking out.
Yeah.
But oh my God, just
Back off, man.
let them take your car.
Yeah.
He can take your car. You'll be fine.
Deal with it later.
Just the number of times when these people choose fight when they could have just chosen flight
Yeah.
as their fear response instead.
And
but they're afraid and they fight.
And escalating a bad situation to make it worse.
The one that really gets me actually is Jeff, who for the most part is our number one best example of how to respond to an infectious disease, where he's covering his mouth, he's staying away, he's not sharing food, he's doing his best. But he gets so mad at Bert that he starts a fight, a wrestling match.
Yeah.
He physically starts to fight him.
Yeah.
Because they can't not fight.
Yeah.
Even when they are concerned about contact.
Yeah.
They just need something that they can take down and be manly about instead of how about we take care of each other?
Yeah.
How about we don't throw Karen into the fucking cabin outside?
How about we do some
Shed.
how about we apply the scientific method?
Yeah.
No.
How about anything else?
Just fighting.
I also have this slight theory that maybe the locals already have an idea about this disease existing.
Interesting.
Because the old racist at the beginning,
Yeah.
who we actually haven't talked about much,
No.
tells them to be careful in the woods, but then doesn't really say why.
Right.
And there's lots of reasons why you should be careful in a woods, but he like doesn't say it. And then like the hermit's cousin that we meet, who's like out there butchering the pig, she's aware that the animals are sick.
Yeah.
And then she also says that she doesn't think that the hermit is her cousin Henry, because Henry wouldn't approach the kids because, and I quote, he knows about the ordinance.
The ordinance.
And that could be lots of things.
Yeah, that doesn't mean anything.
But it also could be that there's an ordinance about like there's a disease in the woods, everybody like stay away from each other. You know?
Oh.
Like it's possible.
Right.
We also know that Marcy, when she goes looking for help,
Yeah.
she comes upon this like kind of small beach area where it looks like people kind of ran away pretty quickly. There's a bunch of like detritus.
Right, yeah.
And then that whole house is empty, but it has like food and stuff.
Right, yeah.
Inside. So it seems like it was kind of abandoned in a hurry. And
Yes.
then when Bert shows up sick and Dennis is sick, all of those three guys at the convenience store are like, okay, we know what we got to do. Like they're so ready.
Yep.
And they're so ready to know that there's a disease there. And they even have a kit.
A kit.
We don't know what the kit is.
Do we ever see the kit?
We don't see the kit.
Well, like we see,
it's a small box.
We see the small box of the kit, but we don't see what's in the kit.
Yeah.
Right.
And like, is it some sort of anti-disease thing? Because they already know about the disease. I don't know. It's just, it's a floating theory I have.
Interesting.
But it's not related to anything.
Interesting.
What I really want to talk about in our literary corner is plague narratives. Okay.
Okay.
Because one thing that I thought about while watching this was like specifically other plague narratives that I have read. I couldn't help myself. My first one that I thought about was the Decameron, which, if you're unfamiliar, by Giovanni Boccaccio from the 14th century.
Oh, okay. Throwback.
Yeah. And it's really just an opportunity for Boccaccio to tell a bunch of short stories. There are like 100 short stories in it. But the framing narrative of it is that there's a bunch of wealthy characters in Florence, I believe, around Florence, who decide that since they're living during the Black Death, and it's all over the city, they're just going to wait it out by going to a nice little country villa and telling each other stories every night. Which kind of sounds like the beginning of a horror movie in a certain way.
This does sound familiar now. Yeah, okay.
I mean, it's kind of the same setup to this movie that we're watching, where it's like they're not escaping the plague, but they go to this little villa and they tell each other stories around the fire, you know? So I was thinking about that. And then I was thinking about Edgar Allan Poe's The Mask of the Red Death. That's from 1842. And it's, once again, a story where the wealthy people choose to quarantine themselves away from the plague, but they're not successful about it.
Oh.
And I was thinking about it as kind of like a good, I don't know, match for Jeff's fate, where he seems wealthy, but he also like takes the resources, he takes the beer, which is like the safe thing to drink, and hides himself away, but he still ends up having to face the inevitable death. Just like the characters in The Mask of the Red Death do. They technically don't die of the disease. Somebody shows up dressed as the disease and like kills people, but it also is the disease killing people. Just read it.
Well, I don't need to tell you that Jeff, as we understand, Jeff never does get the illness.
He succeeds.
He gets shot by the cops.
So it's like, even when you try to do this and hide away from it, death is still coming for you, which is kind of what the Mask of the Red Death says.
That's what Poe's all about, man.
Side note, the plague isn't specifically like named in the Red Death.
Okay.
But it does involve profuse bleeding at the pores.
At the pores.
As in you're out of your skin. You're bleeding out of your skin. Which just, I don't know. It just sort of felt similar.
Yeah.
With the infectious skin disease.
That's true. Yeah. They're just kind of bleeding all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah. And then to go for something more recent.
Not a throwback. Yeah.
1947.
Okay.
Albert Camus's La Peste, or The Plague, which is kind of a longer story. But it begins with rats dying, and the people have to like clean them up and burn them. However, it's like the act of like wiping out the rats and burning, like coming into contact with them,
the rats,
that they get sick. So like we have this disease that's once again spreading from animals to people. And then we have an attempt to sort of like curb the plague through violence actually being what results in spreading the disease. So like they burn the rats to try to get rid of it, and that's how the disease spreads. But it's also what like they do throughout this whole film. They try to respond with violence, and it just spreads the disease farther. Even in the end, when they kill Paul and they're like, everything's good, we killed all the people who were sick, they then dump Paul's body in the river, and then everybody gets sick.
Right. And then we see the truck of the bottled water company like going out of town.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, it's going to spread. Yeah.
Yeah. The only difference is that then this book goes on to sort of talk about these people living through this like quarantine situation, you know, and what its sort of moral is at the end is sort of like what we learn in the midst of plagues. There are more things to admire in men than to despise because they like all come together and get through
I don't know if that's what I learned.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But then I was like, okay, there are a lot of similarities between all these very different plague narratives. And I was like, what's up? Is there like an plague narrative that all these things are based off of? Is it just living in a plague?
Wait, sorry, pause button. What does mean?
Like
a root. ERR?
U-R.
U-R.
Yeah.
Because ERR is like error, like an error.
Yeah, no, is like the root, the original, the very beginning.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
So like an original plague story that everything else then gets based on.
Right, okay.
But I found this Danish professor, Jørgen Reiber Christensen.
Yes, that is a Danish name. Nice. Here I thought I was having a hard time with grammar.
Jørgen Reiber Christensen.
Yep.
They did a meta-analysis of various types of texts dealing with the plague. It did a study in 2015 called The Formula of Plague Narratives, citing our sources.
Yes, got it.
And in it, they analyzed 16 plague texts. And this was like way back to like ancient, you know, Greco-Roman stuff with their stories of like actual plagues that were going on to like common day. They had like a French medical team sort of dealing with Ebola in Africa and like writing about Ebola in Africa. And then it had like, so non-fictional, and it also had fictional things, early writings like Decameron, but also more recent things like World War Z.
Oh, sure.
And even like video games and stuff were included.
In plague narratives.
Yeah. And they found 33 common occurrences.
Oh.
For
33 is a lot.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's like with some variation. So they came up with sort of a generic formula of these things. They don't show up in every one, but I basically have the list of them going from the ones that show up most commonly to the ones that show up the least commonly.
Okay.
And I thought it might be fun for us to sort of think about them and how they show up in Cabin Fever.
Okay.
Just for funsies.
Most common plague narratives.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. They found that fictional texts about plagues tended to have about 19 of these 33 on average.
Wow.
And non-fictional ones tended to have about 14 of these 33 in them.
Okay.
So, like, these are things that come up all the time. So, the first one is numbers of dead. At some point, they, like, list how many have died.
Oh.
That is actually one that's not, I don't think.
In this.
I mean, we kind of have the cops at the end trying to tally how many there were. But that's, like, really it. Then we have the source of the pestilence, which in this film is made very obvious as like water and stuff.
Yeah.
We don't really know how it started before that.
Yeah.
But like we kind of have that. We have description of symptoms.
Yes. Blood from the pores.
Yeah.
Yes.
We have the role of physicians. They actually do squeeze that in. Paul makes it to a hospital.
Oh,
remember?
Yeah. At the very end.
Yeah, he makes it to the hospital.
Yeah.
And the medics there, the doctors there are like, we can't treat this. You need to send him to the bigger city.
Yeah.
And the cops are like, oh, we'll take him to the bigger city.
Yeah.
And just kill him.
As in death.
Yeah. Official measures come up a lot. But I don't think that happens. We don't really see what's happening officially.
No, I feel like we see the locals kind of taking matters into their own hands.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we don't really have, I mean, unless that ordinance is related, but we don't really know.
Yeah.
We have people acting out of fear of the infection.
Of course, yeah.
Obviously, that's all over.
In not the most rational way, but yeah.
One that they found interesting, but that I think is really obvious and not that interesting, is the involvement of animals.
Sure, yeah.
Right?
The dogs.
Yeah, they were like, they were surprised how many had animals in them.
Are you?
The one thing that they pointed out, that it's not just that, like, animals as like the source of the disease, that sometimes it's also how animals are behaving in the wake of all of these humans being diseased. On the one hand, like in our COVID times,
yes,
the whole nature is healing thing,
where
all these animals were like flourishing because the humans were away.
It's true, yeah, I remember.
But then also
that.
like stories about how dogs' owners die and then this dog is left on its own.
Yeah,
which actually we kind of have in Cabin Fever, not really knowing how Grimm died. Either way, Captain. He's a doctor. He's not a military man. He is a doctor.
He's a professor of being a dog.
Yes, Dr. Mambo is left with that and then behaves wildly because he doesn't have his owner.
Right.
So that's an interesting one. Distrust of other people.
Obviously, yeah.
All over this one.
Yeah.
That's a huge problem.
Yeah.
These 5 friends all ganging up on each other.
Yeah.
Ineffective cures comes up a lot. I don't think that's
like something that they think is going to help and it doesn't. Yeah.
Fear of travel as spreading infection, and then also flight from contagion. We have both of those where they don't want to let the kids get away from the cabin because they're going to spread the infection. And then we also have like Jeff literally running away from the infection.
To a literal cave.
Yeah. Mass graves and burials show up a lot in pandemic stories. And
we do get that at the very end. They're like burning all the bodies on the pyre. Yeah.
Personalized cases.
Oh, okay.
Which is just that we're not just talking about the disease as like one big thing that's happening on a population level. We're talking about this is how it's affecting this individual person.
Right, yeah.
Which obviously we get because this is a narrative.
Right, well, we get a narrative, and also as human beings, it's hard to put into perspective the death of 1,000 people.
Yeah.
It's like 1,000 people, wow, that's a lot of people, but like you don't know any of those people, but like if you know
one of them.
Marcy.
Yeah.
Right. And it'd be like, uh-oh. What's happening to Marcy, and then like you can actually have like empathy what's happening in the humans are weird, man.
Another one that was kind of related to like the like official orders and stuff was administration fails, like when the administration just fails you,
when the powers that be who are supposed to help you in this situation can't do it.
We're familiar with in our lives.
That rings a bell for sure.
But also I feel like is kind of present in Cabin Fever if you consider the cops playing this role where they're supposed to be protecting their people, their town.
They're so bad at it.
And they're so bad at it.
Yeah.
And they actually make it worse.
Yeah, and these kids, you know, our main 5 like trying to get help, like they need a mechanic and like they can't get one, right? And like the cop says, "Hey, I'll bring somebody by tomorrow afternoon," and they just never show up. Yeah.
And then he has the story about like, well, wouldn't you believe it? The tow truck broke down, so I needed to get a tow truck to get the tow truck.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't believe you.
Yeah. Would I believe it? No, I wouldn't believe it. Sorry, Deputy Olson.
Oh my God. Okay, so then another thing that comes up is superstition, like coming up with like ways that don't make sense to stop the disease, but you do them anyway.
Of course, yeah.
That's a big one. Also, this two-sided coin of when you're faced with death, whether you go really religious or you go to reveling.
Yeah, just like let's fucking party.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I think that's kind of Marcy's whole speech about, like, how you just want to, like, sleep with somebody because you're going to die anyway. It's, like, that same idea of, like, we're going to die, so let's just party. Yeah. You know? But I also think there is small little bits of religiousness in this, which is when the convenience store people I can't actually remember if it's the mob from the convenience store or if it's the police at the end. But one of them, when they see everything, they're like, there's some sort of like weird satanic rituals happening here.
Unchristian.
And they're calling it unchristian.
And it's like, they literally just had a fire.
Yeah.
Like, calm down, man.
Yeah. So
yeah, we got a little satanic panic going. Yeah. Good stuff.
Survivors in conflict is a big one, which I think we have quite a bit of.
Yeah. That's literally what the movie's about. Yeah.
But then there's also like war. That war tends to bring disease or something like that, and we don't really have that because the story isn't big enough for that. It's not big enough story for it to then blow into like a pandemic either, which is something.
It's not on a big enough
Another
scale.
one that they found a lot was the winter as relief from the plague.
Oh.
Yeah, that was an interesting
because it's
I don't know, because people don't go outside as much.
Yeah, people aren't. Oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah, because then on the other hand, it's also like that's flu season, so I don't know. That was an interesting one that came up a bunch. That was the one where I was like, what? Who cares about the animals? What's this about winter?
Yeah.
Maps in specific locations was a big one.
Okay.
A lot of stories needed to have maps.
Sure.
Okay. Looting and pillaging. We actually do have that. They go to that random cabin and just steal things. That random house.
Oh, yeah. And then doesn't Bert steal a candy bar?
For no reason.
At the very beginning.
Before it even becomes anything. He just steals. Yeah. And then these last ones, which I don't think are in Cabin Fever at all. Marks on doors. That one goes way back to the Bible.
Oh, yeah. No, we don't have that.
Deserted cities.
But we do get not a mark on a door, but when I think Bert is being chased by Dr. Mambo, he like marks a tree.
Oh, getting chased by the convenience store guys.
The convenience store guys, not Dr. Mambo.
He does mark a tree in that kind of way. Yeah, that is kind of cool.
And that scene really like sticks out to me because like you get the fake blood, but then you also get like bits of flesh.
Yeah,
and like sinew, and it's just like, oh, that's gross. Yeah, kind of in that way. And like, is he trying to mark the tree to like throw them off?
I think so, because then they go the other way.
Yeah. Anyway, what else?
Deserted cities. We never really get a big enough story.
We get some
for that.
deserted houses though.
Yeah. So maybe. Yeah. Safe zones and walls to lock out infected. We don't get that.
No.
Divine,
they do send Karen to the shed.
They do actually, and they have the cabin as their safe zone.
Yeah.
So maybe divine punishment. The only thing that kind of feels like divine punishment, in the sense that it just is sort of like, why did that have to happen?
Yeah.
Is Jeff getting shot at the end.
By
and
the
that's
cops,
not plague related.
No.
It's just like, you're an asshole for leaving all your friends and being the only survivor, so you're going to die anyway.
And like, you can yell and shout about how not infected you are, but like, there's so much distrust sown in the larger community that they're just going to shoot you anyway.
Yeah. And then the last one was, which came up very rarely, was identification with the disease. Where I guess there are some stories where there's like some games where you're actually playing the disease and trying to get people. And there are some stories, I think it's World War Z maybe, where even healthy people start to act like the zombies and things like that, which is an interesting one, but it doesn't come up very often. Yeah. But so then it's like, why do all of these things come up so often in plague narratives from way back then to now?
Yeah.
And is it just because they're sort of mirroring, well, real life? And these are things that happen often.
What it's like to live during a plague.
I think I actually even skipped one too, because one of them was supposed to be reports. Press reports. Yeah, I did accidentally. Oh, I skipped a whole line. Press reports, lamentations, being sad about people dying.
Yeah.
And protective clothing, which actually we do have that one in Cabin Fever.
Yeah. Jeff wears a little cloth over his face. Yeah.
And actually the cops at the end, when they're burning the bodies, they have on like little bibs and gloves. But yeah, so it's like, okay, well, are we just mirroring real life? And that's why these things come up? But then there are things that aren't necessarily a part of real life that keep coming up. And like, why is that? And where this particular paper goes from Jorgen Leiber Christensen, he writes, I'm assuming they write, it seems far-fetched to talk about enjoyment of descriptions of plagues, but this kind of repetition of an established scheme may have an effect. The repetitive, formulaic character of these plague tales can to some extent create a narrative containment of fear of epidemics in the reader, and the mimetic embedding of a plague epidemic in a standardized and formulaic narrative form can, in John G. Coelty's words, have the effect that audiences find satisfaction and a basic emotional security in a familiar form. So, in other words, I mean, that's kind of what one of the theories about why people like horror films in general comes from. That it's a safe way for us to confront our fear, and that it feels even safer when we know kind of like the steps that the story's going to go through. So, like, if we kind of know the steps that a plague narrative is going to go through, that makes the fear of plague less difficult to confront. And I'm like, I don't know.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, does watching Cabin Fever, if we had watched Cabin Fever before COVID hit,
right,
would we have been...
Which I had, but a long time ago.
Yeah.
I think about that a lot, right? Like, because I've been watching a ton of Ted Lasso lately, right? And there's only 2 seasons, right? Yeah. As someone with an anxiety disorder, like how I cope with my anxiety, and like I watch the same stuff over and over again because I know exactly what's going to happen.
In formula.
Yeah. Even when like conflict occurs, it's just like, it's okay because I know that this was going to happen and I know that it gets resolved, right?
Yeah.
So like, why wouldn't that still be the same on the grand level of like a pandemic?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, is there some comfort being people who are basically living in a pandemic time? Is there comfort in reading? Is there still comfort in reading these sort of stories as you're living through it?
Right.
To sort of give you an idea of what the scope of it is and where it's going, or that like people have done this before, or that there is a formula to it and we have a way that we're going. Like, is there comfort in that? To have the stories to back up the real life?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know either.
I think there's some comfort in it.
Yeah. I mean, there's certainly a lot of stories about sickness and COVID in particular that have come out since the pandemic started, which I found interesting originally. But now that I've done this sort of research, I'm kind of like, well, actually, no, that maybe makes sense. This is how we're like coping with it. This is how we're understanding it.
Also, you write what you know.
Yeah, and you're fictionalizing something that's scary to make you understand it more and feel like you can grasp it better and control it better. That it actually makes a lot of sense that we would be interested in plague stories right now when we're dealing with one.
Of course. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Because, I mean, on my what I was originally feeling like, it was like, who wants to watch these stories? Like, we're living this. Why would you want more of this?
Yeah.
You know? But now it's like, yeah, maybe that is how you deal with it, is to learn about it more.
And I think also it can help like create connections between people, because especially like during the first bit of lockdown, everything was so isolated.
Yeah.
You know, and you were really kind of just like by yourself or with whoever you happen to be living with, you know, and like, well, it's us now, you know, and like to be able to have that connection around a shared traumatic experience is helpful.
Yeah.
It's therapeutic. Yeah. Well, I also think about like, you know, all the like outer space movies that came out in the 50s and 60s, right?
Yeah.
And like response to the development of NASA and like our space program.
Yeah.
Right. And then, of course, all the movies that are thinly veiled McCarthyism scares.
Yeah.
And it's just like, why would we make movies? Why would this be like our culture when it's like what we deal with every day? And it's like, well,
yeah, because it's our culture and it's what we deal with every day. So of course. Yeah.
I was actually just learning a little bit about your main guy Shakespeare today.
Oh,
completely
my
unrelated.
homeboy.
And he himself, like there were some plagues and sicknesses going around specifically in London.
Yeah.
Where the theaters were closed. So he had to like stay home and figure out a new way to make money. And like that's actually, he wrote a lot of his non-staged works during what we would call a lockdown.
Yeah.
And I thought, good for you, man.
Good for you. I'm glad somebody did some writing while they were on lockdown.
So actually what I want to talk about next is still relevant to plagues.
Cool.
So we see at the very beginning of this movie, it's established that like the boys have all made a bet that they're only going to drink beer that weekend, right?
Yes, because they're dumb.
As they're dumb and they're out of college.
And the other thing that's kind of funny,
yeah,
is that they're doing it in this very like boy way of like, I bet I could do it.
Yep.
I bet I could do it. It's
I
actually
could do it better than you.
It's spurred on by Karen saying that she'd already done it.
Oh, yeah.
Right? She's
I
like,
drink nothing but beer.
Yeah, like those boys made me drink nothing but beer. And they're like, oh, I bet I could do that. I bet I could, blah, blah, blah.
It's not that bad. Yeah. So, and then, you know, we also think about the fact that one of the ways that we know for sure that this sickness is spread is through water, right? And so I thought, because, you know, have you ever like heard stories of like, oh, well, in medieval times, everyone drank beer because water was so contaminated and bad.
That is one of the medieval stories that we get. We get a lot of stories about them.
I got a lot of stories, yeah. So I was just like, I'm going to look into that. So I did a little bit of research, right? And I looked into it, and overwhelmingly, the beer being safer to drink than water and people drinking beer instead of water is not true. Yeah.
That's my understanding as well.
It's a commonly told story, especially during the medieval period in Europe. But no. I mean, people drink beer, sure, but like, no, they drink water. You know, because we think about it, because during the medieval period, you know, the Industrial Revolution hasn't happened yet, right? So there's not a lot of pollutants in the water. Sure, there's bacteria and microbes, but like, if you're drinking from your water source, your body will deal with that those bacteria and microbes. Like when I was in Morocco, there was like this beautiful river that like all the locals in that town were like swimming and drinking from, and my guide was just like, they can drink from this river, you can't, right? Like their bodies are adjusted to the microbes and the bacteria, and mine was not, right? And I was like, okay, I get it.
And I think another thing that people probably think of is that they're often thinking of like medieval larger areas like cities, towns, where they're thinking like, oh, well, they didn't have proper sanitation, you know, a lot of that water was contaminated with like feces and stuff, you know, but like that like wasn't how everybody was living. A lot of people were living in these more rural situations where they did have their own like wells and water sources that like that just wasn't the case.
It actually, especially during the medieval period, that's just not really the case.
Cities didn't really quite kick off yet.
A city is still not really a city, right? God, you set me up so perfectly. Thank you so much.
Love you.
So when we come to time passes and we're in the Victorian era, right? And in London specifically, the River Thames is so polluted.
It's so disgusting.
It's still, I think, considered pretty disgusting to this day.
But in the Victorian era,
it was just everyone. It was just like everybody's trash can. Just throw it in the Thames.
And it was like considered very not the fashion to have a house that was near the Thames because like the smell was so awful. You didn't want to live near it.
No. So during this Victorian era, the Thames is so polluted because we're starting to industrialize. Factories are putting their waste into the river, and there's poop in the river from humans as well as livestock, right? So And then not only that, but apparently this is something I learned, and let me cite my source. I learned this from a YouTube video I watched from the Mutter Museum of the College of Physicians of Philadelphia.
Oh.
And it's got the umlaut over the U, so it's Mutter, I imagine. And the video is narrated by the museum manager, Nancy Hill. So I learned from Nancy Hill that over the course of 100 years, from 1800 to 1900, the population of London goes from about 500,000, 1,600,000 people in 1800 to 6 million people in 1900.
Huge population boom.
So they have a huge population boom, and their city is not set up
they're not
to handle that population. So, and there's also this isn't just in London, this is pretty much everywhere. We still don't have a separation of drinking water from wastewater, right? So everything's the same, right? So the water you're drinking is coming out of the Thames, and so is all the trash and waste and poop is going into the Thames.
Yeah, the water you're getting rid of.
As a matter of fact, in London specifically, but in England generally, there were 3 cholera epidemics in 25 years.
Yeah.
Because of their unsanitary drinking water.
Yeah.
So, in that specific instance, yes, beer would have been a healthier choice than water. However, we hear about it like being something that people did for hundreds of years, right? And throughout tons of societies. It's like, no, pretty much just Victorian England.
Yeah. No, and
that's because they couldn't get their shit together on their sanitation. So
right, yeah. Because they were dealing with kind of unprecedented things.
Yeah.
But also the other thing I think that we don't really talk about when we talk about this idea of like, oh, in the Middle Ages they had to drink beer instead of water.
Yeah.
Is that a lot of the beer they were making in the Middle Ages was more akin to like fruit juice.
Oh yeah, it's like the alcohol content would be like some of it was so low in alcohol that like if you were to sell it now, it would be considered non-alcoholic beer.
Yeah,
right.
So
or like maximum 4% alcohol by volume.
Yeah.
Right?
So the idea that they were drinking that instead of like,
it'd
be the same as saying like everybody was drinking tea instead of water. Like, okay,
and obviously beer like tea is made with water.
Yeah,
right.
It's just processed.
It's processed. It's boiled. Right. But I did actually. Nancy Hill taught me something else very interesting, that there's really just this one instance in which beer would have been a healthier option than water because the hops that they used contained prebiotics, right? So like they might actually have supported like a healthy immune system. And the beer that they were making, at least at the time, was really high in B vitamins, which are usually the vitamins that give us energy. Nice. And it's also the vitamins that are easiest to get from animal products. So especially for like a poor working class person, it might be hard to afford meat.
Yeah.
Right? So B vitamins are nice. And also it was highly caloric, which like, again, a working class person needs the calories, right? Like they probably are... Yeah. The food they have access to is not particularly nutritious. Yeah. Or they might sometimes not have access to enough food in general. So like... in that case, beer would have been a really good option.
Yeah.
You know?
What I'm getting out of this is that, like, beer is the new Gatorade. Everybody should drink it.
Everyone should drink Victorian era beer.
Yes. And be healthy as heck.
No, it's going to be a no for me. So I just thought that was like an interesting little, thing that comes up in the film of just like, drinking beer instead of water.
And it like technically is the healthier option in this film.
And there are
times when it is the healthier option.
But over the course of history in general, no. And like people are still drinking beer, which again is not nearly as alcoholic as it is now, right? But like overwhelmingly people are drinking water.
But also like, I am so in the game of debunking myths about the Middle Ages. And just like thinking about how many people in our world now actually have access to clean water, even in America, is actually not great.
Yeah.
We are fortunate to live in Oregon, which is always listed as one of the highest.
We have the best water.
Places, is always highest on the list for places with like good clean water.
You give me 5 minutes, I can walk to a river.
Yeah. And like we can drink the water right out of the tap, and it's like safe
and delicious.
But even just going like down south to California, like suddenly the water's not really super safe anymore.
Yeah, and tastes weird because of the hard groundwater.
Yeah, and there are a lot of places in America that do not have safe water, and then
it's true. Flint, Michigan, man.
Yeah,
that's what happened in was it Jackson, Mississippi? Just recently, I think over the summer, they had an issue with their drinking water, and they couldn't drink it anymore.
And then also when we get outside of America,
Oh my gosh, dude.
It actually becomes also like a gendered issue where women in like rural areas in like Africa and part of Asia have to spend so much time walking to clean water, or the cleanest water they can find, which isn't always clean, and then walking back, which means they don't have time to go to school.
Yeah, it's that chore overwhelmingly falls to women and girls, right? Yeah. And yeah, that's exactly it. I actually show a video in my health class about clean water and sanitation, and a group of girls in Nigeria who didn't have access to school, or like could only go to school sometimes. They'd fall behind, right? And then of course it kind of ends up turning into an ad for like this water filtration thing that Procter and Gamble, are trying to get people to use, and trying to whatever,
I mean, there's also the book A Long Walk to Water, which is about, well, it's about the Second Sudanese Civil War, but at the same time it's telling the story of a girl who in Sudan every day has to walk to the river and walk back, and what her life is like doing that.
Yeah, and also the walk to get water can be really dangerous. There'll be people there like want to rob you or assault you.
And then the water isn't always safe to drink anyway. Yeah. So it's like, I don't know. We just have, I just feel like with that myth, we have a lot of myths about the Middle Ages that are like
not true,
sent to make us feel like better than them, because it's like quote unquote the Dark Ages.
Yes, of course, yes.
And like, no, we're not better than them actually.
Yeah, human beings are. Like when I was teaching about the medieval period, we were looking at a bunch of like manuscripts, and a lot of the the people who were literate are overwhelmingly members of the church, right? Like monks and stuff. And they're like drawing cats in the marginalia, and I was like, we are not different.
No,
like we just have an internet in which we can share our cat pictures, but like.
No, humans have always been humans.
Yeah, we're always like that.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to talk about archetypes, but do you want to talk about fan theories at all?
If you find them interesting, I already talked about my one little theory, but if you found any fan theories that you think are interesting.
I just found one. So someone from Reddit whose username is SquickChick. So SquickChick says, about 2 years ago, posted on Reddit, that what's meant to happen, that there's like, a subplot that is meant to reveal that Paul and Marcy were always destined to fall in love and be together, right? Because at the beginning of the movie, Marcy and Jeff are dating, right?
Yes.
Whatever. And then we see Paul kind of pining over Karen, right?
Apparently since like 7th grade.
Which is just ridiculous. What... Spending years of your life just like falling for someone who doesn't care about that, I don't relate to that at all. I've never, that doesn't sound like anything I would have done. Anyway, more than once. That Paul and Marcy are destined to be together, right? Obviously, they're both part of separate little love interest stories, but we do see a lot of like visual symmetry between the two, right? Mm-hmm. Like they're displayed in a way that like they're kind of on, either again a mirror, right? Mirroring each other in like their physical, or emotional appearance, right? We also see that, like, if you recall in the film, like, Paul and Marcy get along, and they do kind of seem to work together the best. They work together to, like, help Karen out, right,
They seem to be on the same page a lot of the time.
Yeah, they're good teamwork, right? They do have a lot of, like, when they're taking care of Karen, they have, like, a kind of nurturing couple imagery of, like, taking care of their sick kid,
Mm-hmm. I will say there's also, apparently it's only in the director's cut, the last night that the 4 of them were together in the cabin. So Karen's already sick, but the rest of the 4 of them are together. That we get a shot of Paul and Marcy sleeping in the same bed together. So this is before they slept together, but they're just sort of like sleeping next to each other.
Interesting.
It's just sort of like pre-setting up that they're getting closer to each other. Jeff is off somewhere else by himself because he doesn't want to get near anybody. Bert's by himself because he's always by himself. But Paul and Marcy,
because no one likes him.
No one fucking likes him.
And then obviously, they have sex. And then another fan theory is that that regardless of the beats of the film, like what actually happens in the movie, even if that didn't happen, even if like Henry the Hermit hadn't come around and escalated things, that Marcy and Paul would still have like gotten together by the end of the weekend, right? And then they, and then again, there's like, and then part of this theory is that Marcy would have gotten pregnant from Paul.
That's where they lose me.
And that's where I'm lost. And like that Paul, because Paul kind of is our final boy.
He is our final boy.
He's our final boy. So this idea, because he is, while we can talk about how Paul is actually the worst, right?
God, I fucking hate him.
He kind of is our final boy. He's kind of our hero, right?
He's the one we stick the closest to.
Yeah,
for
we
the
stick
story.
the closest
He's our,
to,
main look into
and
the story.
we're the most concerned with. I feel, his safety, right? And so, the idea was that Paul was gonna die as in a sacrificial way, but then he would live on through the child.
Oh God,
Marcy
I hate
had.
it.
I was like, first of all, how dare you assume that Marcy's keeping that child?
Yeah.
If she gets pregnant, right?
And why would it even be Paul's when she's also sleeping with Jeff?
Exactly. So it's an interesting little idea that, because obviously we're meant to believe that, it's going to be Paul and Karen are going to hook up over the course of this weekend at the cabin.
Yeah,
right?
Everybody in the movie's thinking it.
And
so
Marcy, and Marcy and Jeff are already together. So we're just okay, them too, And so that the point is that no matter what would have happened over the course of this weekend in this cabin in the woods, right, that Paul and Marcy would eventually end up together. It's an interesting little theory.
I definitely do believe that Karen was never actually going to date Paul.
No.
She just wasn't.
It wasn't going to happen.
She wasn't going to.
Yeah,
and I also actually do believe that Marcy was going to eventually get fed up with Jeff.
Yeah,
Jeff. They do not seem compatible at all.
Yeah, Jeff was a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess it just sort of depends on whether Marcy realized that Paul is a slasher killer.
Right. So this is a really interesting little thing. That this movie, right, is obviously heavily inspired by 80s slasher films, right, and other 80s horror, is that this movie does a really interesting job of subverting a traditional horror theme, specifically a final girl, right? We don't have a final girl. It's set up, with 3 boys and 2 girls,
so
which is usually how it goes, right? Yeah. That we would have a final girl, but we don't. Actually, the girls die first. Yeah, both of them. Marcy is technically the first one to die of the 5, and then Karen's not too far behind her, right? But instead, Paul is our final boy, right? And final boys aren't unheard of. I think my favorite example of a final boy is in the second Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy's Revenge, just because of the bisexuality of it all. Right. Yeah, so we have a final boy instead of a final girl. Not unheard of, but traditionally it would be a girl instead, right? And then not only is Paul our final boy, but he is also our slasher.
Yeah, if this is a setup of slasher movies, so he's the one who does the slashing.
He slashes. He's responsible for killing 3 human beings and 2 animals. In this film.
Honestly, I'm surprised that it's only 3 human beings.
Right, so he does shoot Dr. Mambo, right, which is in self-defense, so I guess I can kind of be okay with it. And then he shoots the unnamed deer.
Yeah.
As if the deer would have a name. I love it.
Did to its parents.
Actually, technically, he has a major role in the death of Henry the Hermit, so let's add that. So actually 4 people. Yeah.
Burns him.
Yeah,
really.
He has a role in the death of Henry the Hermit. He kills Karen.
Yep.
Right? Karen is sick. She's barely hanging on, but still alive. And he
technically it's a mercy kill, but
bashes her head in with a shovel.
Which of all the ways to mercy kill somebody?
And then he kills 2 of the locals.
Right. 2 of them?
2, maybe 3.
No, wait, which ones? Okay, so he gets there. Bert is there on the door, ready to shoot them, but he doesn't really pull it off.
But he does. He gets one of them. Bert gets one of them.
No, he doesn't manage to shoot one. He just distracts them in time for Paul to bean one over the head. When that guy is falling down, his gun goes off and shoots the other one.
That's right.
Then Paul kills...
Fenster?
He kills the guy with the kit.
Right. The person he stabs through the ear with a screwdriver. Yeah.
And then he kills Dennis's dad. He sort of impales him.
Yes, Tommy.
And
impaled with a sharp stick.
The other guy at the convenient from that little mob trio.
Yes.
He just puts into the basement and doesn't actually kill. Yes. The cops kill him later.
Yes. And then...
But then he goes to that underage drinking party.
But he doesn't actually kill anyone.
At the underage drinking party?
No.
Oh, he ducks out of the way.
Yes. For party goer number 1... accidentally hits party goer number 2 in the face, which is when we get the my favorite horror part, which is the accordion and the windpipe.
See, my problem with that part is that it is so over the top campy horror humor.
Yes.
That I feel like the rest of the movie isn't. But I feel like maybe it was trying to be campy horror humor, and it just wasn't to my... I just didn't find it funny personally.
Yeah.
So therefore that scene seemed jarring to me as like, you're trying way too hard to be funny and this is not a funny movie. Right. You know, but like probably people who thought the movie was funny thought that fit in right well.
Yeah, the harmonica.
Ooh, accordion down your mouth.
The harmonica in the windpipe is outrageous. Yeah. It's outlandish, right? It's like, oh my goodness, yeah.
Yeah. It just seems like a step above the other deaths where I'm like, okay.
Okay. Except we don't really know that. I mean, apparently it's marked as a death, but like, I don't know. He may have survived.
Maybe. And then does Paul not kill any of those kids? I felt like he does end up killing one of them. Maybe he knocks down and or shoots the officer, but Officer Olsen.
But
he ends up living.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah. So yeah, Paul's got problems, man.
Paul's the other scene that stands out for me for Paul is in the beginning when they're all talking about right after they realize that they burnt the hermit, Henry.
Yeah.
Let's call him by his name.
Yeah.
Give him respect. It's Henry.
Have some respect for the dead. Yeah.
They're all talking about, well, what do we do? Do we call the cops?
Yeah.
Do we go try to help him?
Yeah.
The rain's probably going to put it out. What do we do? They're like talking about him, freaking out. That whole conversation, Paul is sitting at the table with honey on his fingers.
Oh, yeah.
Watching it drip off his fingers.
Yeah.
And they really want us to focus on him just watching that drip off his fingers. And it is such a moment of like, oh, this guy's a little messed up.
Yeah, like, and I feel like we're meant to see the similarity between the honey and like the flesh melting off of Henry's body.
Yeah, because I feel like he even has like his only line in that scene. Mm-hmm. We're not really focused on him, so I'm actually not positive he said it and wasn't one of the other guys.
Yeah.
Because we can't really see who says it, but I think it's him. He says, "Did you see that guy's skin?"
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
So like, so we are supposed to think of the skin in that. But it's like, I mean, on the one hand, I understand that being the way that somebody would maybe cope with something horrific that just happened. Like that was a traumatic event, even if they weren't the ones who died. Like they just think they contributed to killing somebody.
Right.
Like that would be super traumatic. And so like shutting down in that way and just sort of focusing on honey, I don't want to like pathologize that and be like, he's crazy and a psycho killer because of that. But like knowing everything else that's coming with Paul, I feel like the movie wants us to see that as sort of like this guy is like...
Especially when he does kill Karen. Because, like, she's pretty close to death.
Yeah.
He probably, if he's going to mercy kill her, as, like, we're, apparently supposed to believe it is, right? That he hits her a lot of times.
I know, of all
And I was like, you probably only needed to hit her, like, twice?
Yeah.
But, like, he goes for it. And also, like, shovels are heavy, and, like, that is a physical action that is exhausting.
I just don't think that would be the way if I was going to... try to mercy kill somebody.
Yeah. And then,
I mean, you work with the tools you have, but like, does that seem like a better way to go than whatever else was going to happen to her? I think she was going to bleed out before anything else because the dog started eating her.
That's
at that
true.
point.
Yeah.
She was probably going to bleed out. And like, is that a bad way to go? She's probably in a lot of pain, getting a hammer.
We know that they have a gun, although at that point, I don't know where the gun is meant to be.
Well, he just used it to kill Dr. Mambo.
Oh, okay.
Maybe they're out of ammo.
Maybe.
It also is supposed to be a BB gun, though it is strong enough to kill Dr. Mambo.
Dog. Huh.
Though he does get kind of a shot right in the face, so.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know about that gun. Yeah, and then, like, he kills one of the locals by stabbing them through the ear with a screwdriver.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's a little gratuitous.
I mean, again, we're supposed to be like, well, he's acting in defense of himself.
I guess.
Really. Because these guys are coming there to kill him.
Yeah.
So, like, there's ways for us to still be on Paul's side. But, like, just the, like, gusto he goes at it with.
Yeah.
It's just sort of odd. Like, he came ready to kill people. He just jumps to it so quickly.
Yeah, he warms up to it very quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then suddenly he's just like, anybody I can get my hands on.
And we really don't see a lot of, like, remorse.
No.
Afterwards.
And I kind of understand not being remorseful about killing somebody who was going to kill you. Mm-hmm. Maybe.
Yeah.
But, like... to do it in such, like, gruesome ways. He could have grabbed one of the other guy's guns instead of going over to Dennis's dad and, like, impaling him with a stick. Like, he could have shot that guy.
Yeah, there were
For
guns
that matter,
there.
there were other guns. Yeah, and he just leaves those.
There are other guns.
He just leaves those.
Maybe he finds guns impersonal.
Yeah, he wants to kill with his
wants
hands.
to be up
He
close.
wants to bludgeon and stab.
I don't know.
I just don't trust Paul.
I'm worried about Paul.
Plus, just the non-consent issues that he has, not only in the scene with Karen, but also later when we know that he is a peeping Tom. I mean, Bert kind of makes the joke about being a peeping Tom when Jeff and Marcy are having sex, but later when Paul is specifically out there to get help because they are in a bad situation, and he goes to a house where he sees a woman is naked inside.
Oh yeah.
So he just stops and stares at her.
Yeah, and it's like, focus, priorities,
dude.
Paul.
And then the husband comes out with a shotgun, and it's like, right. Paul, you just fucked up your chance to get help.
To get some help.
Because you're staring at this chick.
Yeah.
I don't know. Paul has issues.
I feel like this leads me, I don't know about you, but leads me really beautifully into archetypes.
Yeah, let's play our game. Let's play archetypes.
Okay, so Katie, would you mind, just super quick for, the uninitiated, what this game is?
Okay. So Archetypes is based on the film Cabin in the Woods, which is based on every other horror movie. And it's the idea that when you have these 5 protagonists, specifically in a horror film, but, we like to do it with other things too because it's a fun game.
Yeah.
We put them in, we decide who falls into which archetype with all of its attached significations.
Yes, sure, yeah.
So we've got the whore.
Yeah.
Who dies first.
Always.
We've got the athlete. We've got the scholar, we've got the fool, and we have the virgin who always dies last or maybe doesn't die at all.
As fate decides.
Yeah.
But if she dies, she has to die last.
Yes, and the only important thing is that she suffers.
Yes. Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, I feel like you've actually thought about this more.
I thought about this. There's a little bit of oversimplification here because, if we're given these 5 archetypes, there's only 2 roles for women.
Right.
Which is a virgin and a whore, and it's like, okay, we get it,
But as I've talked about,
You're not buying it.
I'm not buying it.
I love that for you. I usually, because, and then usually with these groups of 5, we usually get 2 girls and 3 boys.
Yeah.
Right? So
and very often one of the girls dies first and one of the girls is our final girl.
Exactly. So it makes sense. So Marcy and Karen represent my whore and virgin respectively.
So I feel like just from what we were just talking about with Paul.
Yeah.
And the fact that he survives to the end.
Is he a whore?
And he's our final boy.
Yeah.
That would make him perhaps our virgin.
Fair enough. I don't think so. But,
Yeah. No, okay. Yeah. So tell me more about these girls. Which one did you say was which?
So
honestly, I could see either of them.
So Marcy is the whore because she does die first, right? And like that is like the signifier of the whore is like she has to die first, right? And also she has sex with 2 different men.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I'm not judging.
Yeah.
But I'm just thinking about like how she is the one that is much more explicitly sexual.
I disagree with that.
Karen is a little more...
I think Karen is the one who is more explicitly sexual, really? Even though she doesn't have those sex scenes.
Right.
We spend more time staring... Well, we get that shot of her in her bikini, which is very much like luxuriating in her body.
Yeah.
Where like, as we were talking about
with
the sex
scenes... We get some shots of Marcy too, though.
Well, we get that one sort of tracking shot of her ass and her jeans.
I thought that was Marcy.
Away. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly.
That's kind of it, though, because even with those sex scenes, we sort of see her back, but we don't, and we do get her boobs and stuff. So, we do get her. But so Karen, I just feel like I was talking about, all she does is talk about sex. And even though she's not the one who dies first, she's the one who's marked for death first.
This is true.
She's the sick one. If anybody was going to, if they were only going to die by the disease, she was going to be the first to go.
Yeah.
That, I don't know. I could see her being the whore just as easily as Marcy.
Interesting. I feel like within the context...
She definitely doesn't seem like a virgin.
I feel like within the context of the film, because like we do hear Karen tell stories about like her past.
Yeah.
And like what she was like in college maybe, right? But like within the context of the film, she's relatively virginal.
All she does is kiss a guy.
She kisses a guy. She's kind of boring. She's like...
Though, I mean, they also
but not explicit with Paul.
They make jokes about how she's going to sleep with Grimm. Because apparently that's the sort of thing Karen would do.
Oh, I also found a different fan theory that Marcy sneaks off to have sex with Grimm in exchange for his marijuana. And of course, it's like, it's 2002. Like, you might have needed to have sex with someone for marijuana. Like, you couldn't just...
And they think Marcy did that instead of Karen?
They think Marcy
Karen
does that,
was the one who was like, bring your weed when you come back, and was like flirting with
Oh,
Grimm.
yeah.
Why would they think Marcy did that instead of Karen?
Because Marcy's the whore.
Especially since Karen's the one who got sick first. What if she got it from having sex with Grimm?
Yeah, exactly.
That seems like a better theory to me.
Yeah, well, now I don't know what to believe. Anyway, yeah, just again, because while you're right, Karen is marked for death first, Marcy does die first.
I don't know. I feel like once again we have a situation where the girls are so like almost interchangeable.
Yeah.
That it almost doesn't even matter.
Because Eli Roth has never met a human woman. Yeah.
I couldn't really call either of them the Virgin.
No. I like the argument for Paul being the virgin.
Because even though he does have sex, I feel like he has it in that like pivotal moment that like Sydney in Scream has sex.
Yeah.
You know? She has it in that sort of like character moment.
I think
that is different.
I think Paul is our fool. Because he, which I can sympathize with. He's wasting a lot of time on a girl who's just not into him.
Yeah.
It's a pretty foolish thing to do.
Yeah. It could also be a virginal thing to do.
Fair enough.
I feel like also,
yeah,
Bert and or Jeff have the hallmarks of the fool of when we think about the inebriation part.
Oh, yes. For a while, I was operating under the assumption Bert was my fool just because he's gross,
and
basically.
He's, drunk and stuff.
Yeah.
Doing dumb things like lighting fires in the middle of the forest and stuff.
Shooting squirrels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My first instinct with him, just from his appearance, I guess, was jock. But I had nothing really to back it up.
Fair enough. Yeah. Baseball cap.
Yeah. He just sort of had a jock
and then in
to
my
him.
brain, I was like, is he wearing a Letterman's jacket? And I was like, no, I got him confused with Chris Hemsworth's character in Cabin in the Woods.
Vibe,
where he is literally wearing a Letterman's jacket, right?
I mean, going hunting is sort of, I feel like, a part of being the athlete. It sort of is connected to being the hunter.
Exactly.
So there is that.
Yeah.
But he's bad at it.
But I also think that a very foolish thing for Paul to do was to have unprotected sex with Marcy. Yeah. That was a stupid thing for him to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he also seems to have a really hard time focusing on the task at hand, right?
Until it's murder.
Until it's time for murder. Like when he's looking for help and he gets distracted by a naked lady, it's just like, come on, get it together, Yeah, I do think that Bert. And then of course, once you go through them, you kind of run out of archetypes, and it's just like, well, then you need to,
none of them are the scholar.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Jeff has to be, probably.
I think Jeff is our scholar because it's insinuated that he studied pre-law in college, and
that go to law school.
He might go to law school, and he is technically does take the most correct course of action when met with this communicable disease, right? He covers his face, all the stuff we talked about, and also he just kind of looks like a know-it-all asshole.
He really does.
Yeah.
God, I hate. Ugh.
And then remember when they're at the convenience store at the beginning and he makes some reference to litigation or you're gonna get sued, and I was like, okay, buddy, calm down.
Calm the fuck down, Jeff.
And then Bert is our athlete. I think he is the one who takes action the most. He's the one who does the most to fix the car.
I mean, his response to everything is to fight it.
Right. He drives into town for help. He seems to be proficient in hunting, right?
I wouldn't call it proficient.
He's a hunter.
He has a BB gun.
He's got
is what he is.
And he's drinking beer.
He is a man who has a BB gun.
Yeah.
That does not make you a hunter.
And he does. And as you mentioned, right, he reacts to things, with violence and with physical action.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm just now realizing that this really is just sort of the crappiest, worst version of all of these archetypes.
Yeah, right.
It's just as bad as you could be.
And I think
you're just awful at this.
I think there's really something to say about the fact that the virgin and the whore are pretty interchangeable, right?
Well, I mean...
And if we think about archetypes of women, it's a tale as old as time. You are either the virgin or you are the whore, right?
But, yeah.
And, and so there's really no room to be anything else, right? And also, we care so little about women's inner lives that, a virgin and a whore, while those are the only two things you can be, and they are meant to be opposites, they often overlap.
Right. Which goes to, it just goes to how these women are written.
Yes.
But it also goes to the limitations of thinking of the idea that women have to be the virgin and the whore. Especially when we think about, well, if it's the whore, then she has to die first. But then what about the virgin having to die last? In this case, neither of those girls die last.
It's true.
Paul dies last.
So
doesn't that mean he has to be our virgin?
He would be a virgin, yeah.
And then, what is... Marcy are full. I mean, maybe for saying I'm healthy and not using a condom. You know, like she's as much of a fool in that situation as Paul is.
I wonder if... What about this?
Marcy's also kind of the one, if we want to go to those hallmarks of virginity and like with the connection to like not the virginity side, but the more like Madonna whore thing, that dichotomy of like this more motherly thing.
Yeah.
But she's the one who's doing a lot of the cooking and the cleaning and the taking care of people.
That's true. She makes dinner.
Yeah.
Doesn't she?
And she cleaned all the plates and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's a good point. Okay, hold on. I got an idea. Hold on. Okay. So, because you could do it with more than 5, right?
Yeah.
So let's get Grimm in this.
Oh, Grimm!
So then if he's
the fool.
He's a fool. So then that makes Karen and Marcy both whores.
Oh.
And that makes Paul the virgin.
That's an interesting way to think of it.
Because,
who cares about the women? They're both whores.
With Grimm.
Because, yes, it's funny, you slut.
Wait, is Marcy the one who gets called a slut and a whore? Or are they both called a derogatory name?
Marcy is called a slut by Bert.
Okay.
Karen is called a whore by Bert.
Yeah, so there you go.
They may also get called other things at other times. Those are the 2 I recall off the top of my head.
Right, exactly. So both of the women are whores.
Because that's
Paul's
how this movie
left
sees
to be
women.
the virgin because he is the final boy. He does survive the longest, right? And there are things about him that are quite virginal, right?
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, because so much of this is focusing on him trying to get laid.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Which is like such the classic, like, when we think instead about those like teen comedy movies,
oh, God.
you have that virgin guy who's trying to get laid by the hot chick on the,
God.
That could have been his story if this was
true.
one of these movies.
Yeah, if it wasn't a horror film, yeah. And then, Grimm is very foolish. He's just kind of like walking around the woods.
Yeah.
He's got a ton of weed, which, you know,
I mean, the inebriation part of being a fool is having the weed.
He's just he's very silly. He's kind of the comic relief. Like they're interested in learning about Dr. Mambo and he just like totally blows it off. And it's like, yeah, professor of being a dog.
Yeah.
Do you feel like Bert is your athlete or is maybe he more of a fool? Because he's also quite foolish.
He is quite foolish. Yeah, no, but I think there's something to be said about how much he chooses fight.
Yeah.
In every opportunity he can.
Yeah. And then there's Jeff,
who just has to be a scholar just by virtue of elimination.
Yeah, that's all that's left.
He's technically, God no, it's just they're all so.
I hate Jeff so much.
I hate them all so much.
So those are my archetypes.
Yeah,
I think.
No. I don't think I feel strongly any particular way about it, but I like that. I think that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I think I could be swayed a lot of ways though on this one because that's part of the fun of the game.
It's a fun game. Like, you could, this is the thing is that all of these archetypes are very specific and very restrictive boxes that human beings don't fit in.
Yeah.
But like,
let's try to make them anyway.
We can make them. Yeah. Exactly. Anything else?
No, I think we can close it off here.
Let's never watch this movie again.
This has been Deep Thoughts, Shallow Plots.
Join us next time where we will be discussing The Evil Dead, the 1981 version.
Thanks, as always, to Matt for our music and general sound goodness.
And until next time, we'll need the kit.